to Section 92-3.7 about your revised statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda when the item is taken up in the following order. First, in-person testimony in the council chamber, then remote testimony. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement, as is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. For remote testifiers, when your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. For those who are joining us by telephone only, I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Please video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you're called to testify. When the timer reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. All registered testifiers will be called upon first. Then I'll give persons who have not registered an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. Please utilize the raised hand feature in Zoom to be called upon. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and if any, I will call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described in the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. So we'll dive right in to agenda item number 1. That is Resolution 23-79, which is the Council's appointment of Mr. Rex Akutagawa to serve on the Rate Commission of the City and County of Honolulu for a term to expire on June 30th, 2024. We'll take testimony first, and then we'll ask the nominee to come up. So we'll proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to testify? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do you have any remote testifiers?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll proceed. I see we have Angela Melody Young.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security. Testifying in strong support, and just wanted to thank the council for the thoughtfulness when drafting the ordinance as it relates to the ADA provisions.
Okay. Angela, is this for the
Bill 32?
Bill 32. Okay, we're doing Bill 32 next. This is the Rate Commission nominee.
Oh, okay. So sorry.
Yeah, we'll get to you next. Thanks. All right, is there anyone standing by remotely to testify on Resolution 2379?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none. Members, I believe we have the nominee here. If you'd like to come up to the mic and make a statement, the on button is the right side button in front of you. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Rex Akutagawa. I just would like to thank all for allowing me to be a candidate for the nomination of the Rate Commission of the City and County. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions for the nominee? Floor Leader Cordero.
I just want to say thank you for being willing to serve on the Rate Commission. And Mr. Akutagawa, I was just wondering, because of your your professional background, how do you feel that will help with the Rate Commission?
Well, I believe as a part of the Department of Transportation Harbors Division, I have knowledge as well as utilizing the bus daily for 6 days a week. And I believe that experience will allow me to provide a good input into any Rate Commission determinations.
Wow, that's great. Great to hear that as well. And I hope that you will be able to have enough time to take leave, from your job to do this Rate Commission.
Well, I believe as a part of the Department of Transportation Harbors Division, I have knowledge as well as utilizing the bus daily for 6 days a week. And I believe that experience will allow me to provide a good input into any Rate Commission determinations.
Wow, that's great. Great to hear that as well. And I hope that you will be able to have enough time to take leave, from your job to do this Rate Commission.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Okay, well, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Kutagawa, for your willingness to serve, and we'll see you at full council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-79 be reported out for adoption. Is there any discussion? Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. All right, now we're on agenda item number 2. This one is Bill 32 of 2023, which amends Chapter 15B Revised Ordinances of Honolulu 2021, the public transit provisions, to incorporate rail service, update general provisions, and repeal outdated provisions. Members, we do have a posted proposed CD1, and for your amendments, for your information, the summary of amendments is listed on the agenda. We're going to now go to in-person testimony on this. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Manaku.
You guys not going to give us what you guys changing?
It's on the agenda. I'm sure we can provide a copy of the proposed CD1 with the summary.
I didn't see what you guys were changing, but anyway, James K. Monaco Senior, concerned parent, grandparent, great grandparent. You know, I'm concerned about. Well, I'm not sure what I should be concerned about, but I'm concerned about the changing of our what you guys changing. Wow. See, can I have a rundown of what you guys changing, because I'm.
So for the CD1 versus the original Bill 32, the only changes are to the numbering of the chapters of the revised ordinances that we're changing. So the amendments are not that substantive. The underlying Bill 32, the original Bill 32, does have a number of broad changes.
Because.
And I'm very sure the departments will cover this in their presentation on this.
Yeah, because what I'm looking at, or what I thought was happening, was that we're going to ride the train, yeah? And I thought we were going to ride the train with a transfer from the bus. So I'm not sure if we're still going to do that. We're still going to do that, okay? As long as we're going to do that, then I'm really not sure what I'm going to have, what we're going to do. So I'm not sure what I have to say. But if we're going to use a transfer to get on the train, then I'm all for that.
We'll make sure that the department covers that as part of their presentation of Bill 32.
Because that's what I'm concerned about. Because presently, we don't have any transfers, and so that was my main concern, is that we were promised that if we're going to use a train, we were going to have transfer from the bus to the train, and from the train back to the bus again, because we're going to have to use the bus twice. Yeah. So if that's going to happen, then I'm for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I keep this? Because
Yeah.
Because I like to go through this. Yeah. Thank you.
Members, any questions for Mr. Manaku? Okay, thank you. We'll make sure those questions are covered in the presentation of Bill 32. Clerks, are there any other individuals standing by to testify in person?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to remote testifiers. I see we have Angela Young, who is registered to talk about Bill 32. So now's the time.
Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security Watch in strong support of Bill 32. And I'd just like to thank the council for the thoughtfulness when drafting the ordinance. As a disabled citizen, I'm appreciative of the ADA provisions. And so I'd like to comment, though, on 3 subject matters as it relates to this policy. So 1, about the animals, 2, lewdness, and 3, surveillance cameras. So first, the subject matter about animals. Usually, the animals that you see on the bus are not in kennels. And some of the animals are ESAs, emotional support animals, not service animals. So I think it should be for the consideration of the City Council to consider legislating the parameters so that things aren't like, it doesn't get confusing when HART starts to operate. And then also, two, lewdness. So this is something that occurs a lot on public transit systems, and this is an activity that should be explicitly prohibited on a HART. I've personally witnessed this, and it is very traumatizing. Hawaii Revised Statute Chapter 712-1217 says, 1, a person who commits the offense of lewdness in a public place.
If we could wrap, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Wait, what?
If we could wrap up that part, like we have some of those definitions in here already.
I actually looked through the document. There is no. Okay. Well, anyways, so okay, I will wrap up. In conclusion, lewdness should be strictly prohibited, and 3, the city should consider legislating parameters for surveillance cameras. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Please refer to my written testimony.
Yeah. Members, any questions? Okay. Seeing none, clerks, is there anyone else standing by to testify remotely?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. We have Director Morton here, who can maybe walk us through the background of Bill 32, as well as some of the key changes that are being proposed, and maybe we can touch upon the transfers as well as the lewdness provisions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Roger Morton, for the record, Director, Department of Transportation Services. Bill 32 is intended to extend the existing prohibitions on riding in transit, things like spitting and a whole issues of things, by basically including rail in the definition of transit vehicle. Now, the way we proposed and amended this bill was we struck out large patches of the original one and then replaced it with a block of new language. But in essence, we did not change most things. And one item that we did add was an area that prohibited intimidating and harassing behavior on a transit vehicle. We are in discussions with HPD over that particular provision, and we will be meeting with them shortly to do it. But from my perspective, it is the one concern that's universal throughout the country right now, is the need for all of us to keep our public transportation systems not only safe and secure, but perceived to be safe and secure as well. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions on that part of the bill. Just to answer some of the testifiers' questions very quickly. First, the questions on transfers. Transfers are allowed now from bus to bus. They will be allowed from bus to rail and from rail to bus. I think the one area of confusion is that paper transfers are no longer provided as part of our system. All transfers must be made with the use of a holo card. To ride the rail, unlike the bus, where we do allow cash fares on the bus, we still allow those. All rail trips must use a holo card. It is an automated system. It has gates that have to be activated, not with cash, but with a holo card. But that every rider is provided 2.5 hours of time to transfer to another vehicle, be it a rail, be it a bus, after the first tap of the system. So transfers are specifically allowed, and in fact, we've expanded them slightly as we move forward. With respect for the desire to have other things explicitly prohibited, we do have quite a large list of things that are prohibited in the bus. Some of them are written in the ordinance, some of them are not. For example, the sensitive place ordinance includes public transportation as a place where weapons, guns are not allowed. With respect to surveillance cameras, there are existing surveillance cameras on buses and even more sophisticated camera system on rail, including real-time camera availability within the vehicle, at the stations, and the park and ride lots, and a manned position in the rock that will be continuously monitoring all of the cameras there. So we think the camera issue is done. With respect to animals, emotional support animals, I think specifically was the question. Technically, emotional support animals are not allowed on public transportation. Only service animals are allowed. Service animals are defined as an animal that is specifically trained to perform a task to help the person. The practical issue with that is for someone like a bus operator to correctly identify what is a service animal and what is not. I think the protocol that's used by the bus company is when someone gets on the bus and it's obviously a service animal, such as a blind person with a guide dog, the training says that is allowed without any question. If an animal gets on with a person and it's not apparent what it is, the driver is instructed to ask, is that a service animal? And the training says that if the person asserts it is a training animal, that's the end of the discussion. It is allowed, unless the animal is disruptive or looks to be a threat to the other people on the vehicle. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a practical solution. And with that, I'm available for any questions about any part of my testimony or the ordinance.
All right, members, questions. We'll start from this side to that side. Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director. Quick question. So on the bus, you can do that. You can have the bus operator kind of assess if it's a service animal that's qualified or not. But on the rail, how are we doing this again?
Well, there are station personnel in all the stations. That's our first line. Second line would be that there are customer service representatives that are circulating on the trains. That these are Hitachi employees. Third one would be that we also have contracted security on the vehicles, not on every vehicle, but they'll be circulating through, and they would basically would perform the same task as of looking to be, and essentially what we're really, it's really hard to determine whether a particular animal is a service animal or not. Really, the practical problem that we're looking for is does the animal look to be aggressive? Does it look to be disruptive? Does it look to be a threat to the other people on it? And it is, I think in our society today, I mean, I see a lot of animals going through Safeway and going to places, and it's changed a lot over the last many years, and it's no different on public transit.
So that was my question, because like in every community, I see mine in strollers and carriers. Yep. And so when that happens at the bus or now the rail, well, I guess currently you probably are having to experience that with the bus system. If it's not a service animal and we know that it's just a pet being carried on, but they're not seeming aggressive, then how do you be consistent in enforcement?
Again, our enforcement is to ask the customer, is that a service animal?
So if they say yes, that's it. We don't.
If they say yes, that's it. I mean, even the airlines have the same issue. Some airlines will push it a little further. They'll say, what is the skill that the animal has? But with 1,300 CDL drivers, I think it's probably, that's our training in any case, would be to ask the passenger. And if the animal does not look to be dangerous or aggressive or threatening in any way, then generally our training is that would be the end of the interrogation.
And we don't have issues with aggressive animals being told, yes, it's a service animal, and then they're allowed onto the vehicle. Do you have issues with that?
If there are
angry passengers who are not wanting to let go of their animals before they get on?
If there are aggressive animals on the vehicle, the driver is allowed to ask the person to get off. The driver is allowed to call for assistance from a supervisor, and the driver is allowed to call HPD.
And
But that's
been-
that's a judgment call on the part of the driver that the animal appears to be a direct threat to other riders on the vehicle.
So that's not the main concern right now. I haven't heard any stories of that in the news where people on the mass transit or bus service being attacked by animals. That's not an issue that you're facing right now.
I have seen a handful of issues, not many.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you. Director Morton, regarding the advertising aspect in the bill, is it going to just be similar to what we see on the bus? And because right now, we do see a few like fast food sometimes. I know, like on the bus one time I saw Jack in the Box and stuff like that. But in the bill, it mentions, it kind of sounds like it's more related to the vendors and city transit operations. So would you be able to share a little bit about that?
Sure, we do want to be empowered to have advertising on the rail the same way we have it on the bus. And the way we do it on the bus is we use a third-party contractor that is periodically concessioned out through a bidding process. We just want to make sure that the ordinance allows us to follow the same form on the rail, hopefully make a little bit more money. We don't make a lot of money on advertising. Most of the advertising money that is made in transit is on exterior advertising. As we go forward and open rail, you know, there could be places where we would want to expand advertising, perhaps in stations. But we're very mindful of the longstanding tradition of the Outdoor Circle and other groups that are rightly proud of their efforts to control exterior, you know, advertising in general on our beautiful Aina.
Okay, got it. And then another portion of the bill is relating to strollers and carts, I guess, or carriages. And does that relate to also like grocery kind carts that I see my neighbors when they go to the People's Open Market and then they coming out with stuff, with vegetables coming out? Does that relate to that? Because in the bill it says, well, I guess, carriage or stroller must be folded and stowed out of the way, and that's mainly towards with children in it. But how about the ones that have like things in a cart, I guess?
Well, again, our attempt here is to legalize some things within rail that aren't done. Now, the difference between rail and a bus is that a rail is got a couple of things. It's a wider vehicle. It's got more space to do things. So the aisle is not quite as confined as it is in a bus. And more importantly, on a rail vehicle, there is controlled acceleration and deceleration. Unlike a vehicle on a city street where you can have a vehicle pull in front, which if you slam on the brakes and you have, say, a cart that's in an aisle, that can become a projectile. That's not a threat on the rail system.
Okay, got it. And I know in another part of it, you mentioned about baggage and oversized and bulky items, and it says that if it protrudes into another seat or interferes or causes discomfort to other passengers, that it is, what do we require for such type of baggage or luggage or oversized things?
Well, the ordinance provides some general language on baggage within a bus, and the bus company has adopted a policy that goes into great detail over what's allowed, what's not allowed. For example, a boogie board without a skeg is allowed. A surfboard is not allowed on a bus. The rail is a little different because it was designed with baggage in mind. It was designed with carrying other things. And so we will likely come back to the council at some future point looking at modifying the baggage regulation to allow more. In fact, we have already, when we had the rental car shortage on the island, we liberalized our baggage rule on Route 20, the airport vehicle, because we were stranding visitors at the airport. They couldn't get a car, they couldn't get out. And so we liberalized our rule. We've been monitoring it. while it does, it provides some inconvenience, I think that we've learned a lot from doing that on the one route. And frankly, in mass transit in general, baggage is usually tolerated. It's not something that anyone likes, but the balance between allowing people to use public transportation and the prohibition on using it usually is, in most cities, it's in favor of that. We were always a little different in Hawaii, in Honolulu particularly, because of the sheer demand that we had of visitors that were going to Waikiki. So we know that we have to change something. It doesn't make sense for us to allow someone at the airport to get on a rail vehicle and ride to Civic Center or Ala Moana and then be told that they can't continue their trip because we have a baggage ordinance. But that's going to be future changes that we would recommend.
Right, definitely. I remember having my luggage either to go on when the 19 was still in operation, and then 20.
Well, now it's the 20. And
now the 20, yeah.
Maybe a common sense one would be that the rules governing onboard airline baggage, overhead storage, maybe that's a reasonable maybe that's reasonable to allow that, but not to allow large oversized bags and things.
Definitely. Thank you for that information, because that definitely has affected me going to the airport from Hale before. Okay, with that, my one last question is relating to the operating, oh my gosh, I totally lost it, but operating revenues relating to the transfer passes, and then talking about like how, you need a holo card to operate the gates, or, I guess to get you through the gates. Let's say they just have a transfer pass and no more holo card, and they go down to the big the gate where there's the ticket area. Will they be able to put in their transfer pass and then get a holo card from that, or like how will that happen?
Yeah, we advise people to have the holo card in advance. You can buy a holo card at the station.
Okay.
But we don't have a transfer pass, other than a holo card.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's say in addition to just having the cash, they'll submit the cash into the, I guess, the slot, and then pay for both the holo card and the fare that they'll be paying for. Okay.
That's the idea, yes.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me this time.
Of course, Councilmember Tupola.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Aloha, Director Morton. So I have a few what is the word? Formatting questions, and then I just wanted to ask a few other questions. So on page 8, letter B7, it's talking about what you can't do, the spitting, etc. And then on page 9, B9, capital C, it also says something similar, but it just says you can't do it towards the operator. So just a suggestion, because you're talking about similar things, but you're putting in two areas, and I understand one's under harassment and intimidation. So just a thought. Then on number 10, it says when boarding. So just like as a formatting thing, you guys are using verbs at the beginning of all of these, spitting, throwing, using, and then you say when boarding, which doesn't match that. And then on page 10, number 15 and 16, also those ones should have verbs and not knowingly, which is an adverb, just to keep up with the consistency of these rules. And then on letter C, page 10, it's the same verbiage as page 7, letter B. So in letter B, it says, it is a violation of this ordinance for any person to engage, blah, blah, blah. And then on letter C, page 10, it says it again, it is a violation of this ordinance for any person to engage in the following. So I think you guys meant to continue on, because you go on with more suggestions of what can't be done there. So then on letter D, then you specify, okay, now we're talking about carriages, letter E, commercial shopping carts, F, animals, etc. So those are my only suggestions, because I think that those are, minor things that maybe just OCS can look at, but the rest of it made sense. My follow-up question was, which part did you say was different from the strikeout that you guys added in?
We added a section on page, remember that? on page 9. Paragraph 9 on page 9.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No,
Wait.
the
Number 9.
number 9 on
Oh, okay,
page
okay.
9.
Yeah, I noticed that was different. Okay, so that was the only section that you guys added in, correct?
Again, we made some really non-substantive changes in, for example, in the carriage rules and those things, but that was more just to reflect the different environment within the rail car versus a bus. No substantial changes.
Yeah, the rest of it looked about the same. I went through all of the strikeouts just to see that. I guess my last question, just for one of my constituents, is in regards to the holo cards. So you said we're not using transfers anymore. So, right? Is that what you said?
I said we're not using paper transfers.
Right, paper transfers.
Right.
So the holo card can then be the way to transfer.
Correct.
So if I'm going from the bus to the rail, then that can be the transfer.
Yes.
Okay. The end. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I have 2 questions to build upon that. So let's suppose Mr. Manaku comes in from the leeward side, takes the bus to East Kapolei, hops on the bus, gets off at Aloha Stadium, and hops on the number 2, or I guess that would be the new number 1, all the way into
1L.
town. If he taps his card on the first bus and then taps into rail and then taps into the second bus, is he going to be charged $3 or is he going to be charged the cap for the day?
Well, he would be charged
yeah.
$1.
That's right.
But it's a one-time charge.
So within the 2.5-hour window.
Within a 2.5-hour period from the time of first tapping. And that 2.5 hours was made so that you could virtually transfer from any part of the system to complete your trip.
Great. Is that how it works on the bus right now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Good. I was worried I was getting charged the max just from one trip. Okay. The second question is on page 18. This proposes a new extremely low income fare, an annual pass of $45. I don't have any substantive objections, but I want to ask if the Rate Commission had a chance to consider that.
I know the Rate Commission chair is here. And I think that what we were doing was correcting an unintentional error in the last ordinance that should have included that, but by oversight, it did not. So that was not intended to be a new thing. And I'm actually, I am honoring that fare now, but I would like the council to incorporate it within the ordinance.
Okay, good. Members, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. So, members, we did have a posted CD1, which just makes minor changes to the specific numbers of ROH that are being amended. We, of course, will have another committee hearing on this, and we can have any further, maybe more substantive amendments at that time, if members would desire to do so. But the chair recommends that Bill 32, 2023 be amended to the posted CD1. Is there any discussion? Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, Bill 32 of 2023 is amended to the CD1. Chair then recommends Bill 32 of 2023 CD1 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion on that recommendation? Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. And then we'll move on to the last agenda item for today. This is regarding the Honolulu Transportation Demand Management Plan. Joining us in the council chamber, we have Director Roger Morton and Christopher Clark from the Department of Transportation Services to give a brief presentation to the committee. We also have standing by remotely Julia Ween from STEER. For your information, the presentation is available online as Departmental Communication 282. Before we do that, I'm going to do testimony, and then that way we don't have to return to that at the end. So clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers on this agenda item?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay, is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify on the TDM? Okay, there being no in-person testifiers, we'll now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers? I see we have one registered. Is she on?
Mr. Chair, she logged off.
Okay. Is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay, great. If the presenters are all ready, we can have them dive right in. We also have with us Max Kalhammer, planner with the Transportation and Performance Division of DTS.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. As was mentioned, is it working now?
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
No. And then maybe you just have to lift it up a little higher. Yeah. There we go.
I'm Chris Clark from the Department of Transportation Services. I'm the chief planner in the Transportation Performance and Development Division. We appreciate your time, and we'll try to, there's a lot of slides, but we'll try to move quickly, and please ask any questions as you like during it. And so this work is funded by the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization. 80% is funded. And so we have to close this project out by June 30th. And so we'll be going in the month of May through to their Citizen Advisory Committee, their Technical Advisory Committee, and their Policy Board for approval. And so right now this plan is out for public comment. And so it's great timing that you allowed us to be here today. And also want to introduce my colleague, Max Kalhammer. And so we're going to kind of rotate as we move through the slides. And so the first slide, what is TDM? And I know there's a lot of acronyms in our industry. And so transportation demand management is this idea, of course, that our primary purpose as DTS is mobility. We want to get people to and from their destination. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And we want to do that in a way that reduces congestion, that lower vehicle emissions. And so and in order to do that, this plan redistributes travel. So we want to make sure we can pull any levers that are out there in order to redistribute travel so we can more efficiently use our system. So that's maybe people traveling at different times of day, using a different mode like transit versus driving alone, or pricing those things. And so we're using this plan as a way to set out some goals and objectives so we can use encouragement, education, incentives. So it's really a work plan over the next 5 years that we can fund that will be able to accomplish those goals for the city. And so why would we do this? Well, of course, there's increasing traffic congestion, travel times are increasing, car ownership is up. So even though population is not really increasing, the number of cars that people own as a percentage is increasing, vehicle miles are increasing, and then circling or trying to find parking. Even though parking is available, the technology to be able to know where that parking is available is not readily out there. And so really important that we can use these investments to make sure to accomplish that goal. And so what we're going to talk about today is just a little bit about the plan, which we hope to approve in June. And then over the next 5 years, what we're going to include in the program, HNL Connect, and then how we're going to be able to accomplish this moving forward. And we're using federal highway funds to do that. And so next, I'll turn it over to Max to cover some details of the plan.
Thank you. And so the plan of Honolulu TDM plan is our way to formalize TDM to address these environmental and equity concerns that we have in our current transportation system. And so the plan development process is that we did a background assessment, including existing conditions of the transportation system, and then we wanted to identify strategic priorities from best practices all around the country, and we selected strategies that are the most appropriate for the Honolulu area based on our steering committee, which was comprised of not just DTS staff, but a bunch of experts in the field. And then the strategy evaluation was also supported by our steering committee and staff. And then we had an action plan development phase, which is the most recent phase, where we actually produced 2 drafts before the draft that is under public review right now. And that draft was reviewed by city staff, the steering committee, and Director Morton and Assistant Director Nouchi. So the vision and strategies, the vision and strategic priorities for the TDM plan are based on 4 core strategies of environment, equity, land use and development, and long-term resilience. And the vision is reflective of what TDM was defined as by Chris in the beginning of our presentation today. So what is the point of having a plan without a product, right? So the H&L Connect program is our way, our vehicle to implement the TDM plan. And the program is going to be consisted of an H&L Connect managed strategy, meaning program elements that DTS itself is going to manage, and Chris will talk about those in more detail. And then there's other agencies and partners who are going to be able to help implement the broader and more the more far-reaching aspects of TDM in our society, because after all, everyone has to participate in TDM. It can't just be a governmental effort. And then developers and employers are going to be incentivized to implement their own miniature sort of TDM programs within their developments through the use of city-provided incentives like for carpools and et cetera, and you'll hear a little bit more about that too. So I'll turn it back over to Chris to talk about the H&L Connect managed strategies.
So the things that we're going to accomplish as DTS through this program include, and I'll just run over them quickly, the details are there, and again, happy to ask any questions or answer any questions, but we're going to sponsor an annual travel challenge. This is something that private sector like Blue Planet and others have done in the past. The Oahu PO is working on one for this year, but try to work with employers so that we can incentivize them to put teams together, to collect data, and try to compete against each other, to use different modes of travel to get to work. The other thing that we're going to do is a series of targeted marketing campaigns, make sure people are aware of the other modal options, the prices and how competitive they are. We're going to reinstate our van pool subsidy program. So this is something DTS had for several years that was very successful using state money. And the incentive there is we can provide van pool providers with some dollars, and then that helps us to get funding back from FTA. So it ends up ultimately kind of paying for itself. And then another component is our restricted parking zone program. So the complement bill number 20, which we appreciate the committee's support on, is a component of this effort which we'll implement. And the key and the reason why this is part of TDM is that we want to make sure that residents who opt not to purchase a restricted parking zone are provided with other opportunities to get transportation subsidies. And so it's a way of funding that. And then we have a couple strategies that we're not going to directly implement, but we'll want to make sure we have some resources to support. And so these are the connected strategies. So we will include developer transportation demand management reporting. And so we've often required developers, as they put in new condos and TOD areas, to have a TDM plan, so a way that they communicate with their residents so that their residents can know about their travel options, and that they can provide subsidized bus passes or take care of their own bus stop that's adjacent to their property. And so we want to make sure that we create really a formula for them to follow, and we're there to help them provide resources and follow up so that they're able to do this. We're also going to support the city's transportation demand management program. As you know, council's provided a lot of funding to rehabilitate the Civic Center parking structure. So we want to best use that asset. We want to make sure that city employees know how they can get to work, that we can help fight the really high number of vacancies. And when new employees on board, that they're provided ways that they can get to work, and that we're able to do that. And so turn it back over to Max to help close out the presentation.
So the H&L Connect support strategies, the efforts that are relevant to TDM and H&L Connect that are already planned or underway in Honolulu, through key partners, the H&L Connect team will support these 4 key support strategies: parking pricing, citywide multimodal efforts, including micro-transit and micro-mobility, some new words in the lexicon of transportation these days, but that would include electric bikes and car share and private sort of paratransit, micro-mobility, basically to service the neighborhoods to get to the last mile for accessing the major investments that we've had in our transportation system, including bus and rail. So it all goes together, and we want to promote our bus rail system through TDM just as much as we want to do it in other ways. And TDM education is important to have the awareness amongst our members of society, and we're going to rely on key partners for that too, including, like, say, the Ulupono Initiative. And carpool matching is another one where there's already an established carpool matching program provided by the state. It's called HI Rideshare, and TDM H&L Connect, will be promoting and making that a more high visibility program for the residents of the city and county and visitors alike. So where are we going next with TDM? Now that we have a public review draft, we're anticipating passage and approval by the funding authority, the Oahu MPO, in May. And then after that, taking TDM into the future, we want to immediately focus on branding and marketing, having media mentions, a lot more media mentions, and partnering with media organizations to do that, and relying on our own fabulous DTS PR staff. We want to have TDM communications to promote events like the annual Travel Challenge. We want to reintroduce the van pool subsidy program for the city, but also for citywide, and have incentives for private van pool operators. We want to have free transit for city employees, as Chris discussed, and we are expanding RPZ. So those are the 5 key immediate areas where we're going to already be starting the TDM program in this FY 23-24. And so to track progress, we need to track progress in order to report on progress. We're going to have what we call our objectives and targets, which have been, there's been a lot of thought put into what are our objectives and what are realistic targets, like 3% mode share shift, for example, from SOVs to transit. We want to have key performance indicators called KPIs. So we're measuring the same things every year for the foreseeable future, and an annual report, which we will have in every February as we organize and synthesize the data. In every January, we'll be reporting on it and issuing a report on the RPZ program every February. So I think that's what we had for you, and we're really looking forward to getting your input, and thanks for your attention, and we'll take questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chris and Max. Members, any questions about the TDM strategy? We'll go with Committee Vice Chair Cordero, and then Councilmember Okimoto.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For my first one question is relating to the HNL Connect, and when will that be implemented as a team, and how? I mean, if you could just explain a little bit more about it, because I don't know how and where it's going to come about.
Sure, happy to do that. So we were able to program in the MPO Transportation Improvement Program, the implementation funds. And so they're available starting in FY24. So we're working on that procurement now on a contract. So as soon as the plan's in place, that will serve as a work program that we can implement, and it's already funded.
Okay, thank you. But when is it going to be implemented?
So the idea is as quickly as we can get through procurement, but funds are available July 1 of 24.
Okay.
I mean of 23. So the next few months, really. But
Okay.
but we'd have to get through procurement and award a contract.
Okay, got it. And may I ask reviving the van pool subsidy provision? I know that I do remember bringing something about the van pool up maybe back in 2021. And so hopefully, I mean, what has changed from the van pool subsidy, from not reviving the van pool subsidy before and doing it now?
So when we had a van pool program prior, we got $1 million from the state that was provided to the city. And so we spent the whole $1 million, and that's why the program ended. And so what we're trying to do here is just provide another revenue source that would be able to support that. The good news is with van pool, it largely pays for itself in that you can report, as long as there's 7 passengers, it's a 7-passenger van or more, you can report those trips into the National Transit Database, and that increases the money we get from the Federal Transit Administration. So we're not providing the full cost, we're only providing a subsidy, so we'll adjust the subsidy to make sure we can get people actually into the vans, and then we'll report that to NTD to get paid back, and that will provide revenue for our bus.
Okay, and then I know it mentioned that it had 57 van pools within the subsidy program that received up to 500 per month. How many are we looking at for this new provision?
So we included funding up to $400,000 a year for van pool in the draft budget that's included in the plan. But we would certainly, right size that over time. You might not have up to that level in the first year. You might not get that many people that would take the service initially. So we'd have to adjust year over year based on the response.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions. The first, in your support strategies, you mentioned the first block was parking pricing, and it states that it's underpriced, and so encouraging travelers to drive. I kind of wanted to know what metric you're using, because it says you're going to adjust the parking pricing in appropriate areas, but also provide education. So I think for most of us, and I am a driver because I don't live in this area, when I come down here, the last thing I think is parking is cheap. To pay it anywhere is a hassle, but I understand that you're trying to incentivize people to stay out of their cars. So what kind of rates are we looking at, and how are you going to get the education out about attractive alternatives for driving cars?
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking those questions. We've had some good successes in our parking program recently, so we were able just this Monday to issue a contract for our on-street parking meters. We also have a concessionaire for our 6 parking garages there in downtown and Chinatown. And so in both those contracts, they're required to provide real-time availability of parking. So there'll be sensors in all the lots and on-street spaces. So you'll be able to see in real time whether or not there's cars there or not, to help you to navigate. Because a lot of the congestion we see is not people, reaching their destinations. Really, once you reach Waikiki or once you reach one of these heavily crowded areas, how do you find a space to actually park? So if we can provide that information, that helps people to be able to navigate to the right place. With parking pricing, the reason why we say it's underpriced is kind of twofold. One is that compared to the private market, we're less than half of what a private space would be. And you see that in that our program loses about $5 million a year. So it's heavily subsidized by the taxpayer in their property taxes that's helping to fund the parking stalls that the city provides. And so that's one of the reasons why we would,
So the rates would go from, if you could give me an idea, it would go from what to what? And I appreciate you being conscientious of the taxpayer dollars. I appreciate that. But what would a person driving see their parking increase?
We haven't, there isn't a draft bill yet to address the increase in parking pricing. But right now, it's less than half of what market rate is. So market rate for a spot might be $300 a month, and the city's charging $150 or $125.
How are you going to get the education you said providing education for alternatives? How is that going to be done?
So we want to make sure, I don't know if you've seen recently, one of the news channels has done a great monthly series where they have, the one that was released this week was about being a pedestrian and showed a resident in Mililani how they saved some of their trips and they're able to walk to destinations. In previous months, it was, I think our deputy was one of the transit users. So that's an example of a great opportunity to be able to make people feel comfortable, just like earlier in the committee meeting. How do I transfer? How do I ride bus? How do I get a holo card? So we want to use these resources so that people feel comfortable using those other options.
But so that's a news story. Are you guys looking at marketing, so needing money to market on television and radio? Is that what your plan is? That's what the news story that was picked up, but the department personally, I mean, itself, how is it going to get the education out?
So we would have to create content. We'd make it available. We'd use any channels that we have, social media channels, or we certainly want to work with the media agencies to see if they're able to take those on. But we want to use the best value that we can to the city, and so we'd be flexible and see what actually gets results and what reaches the target audience.
Okay. Last question. On the near-term priorities, you have the free transit for city employees. Is that the bus and the rail, or what does that entail?
Yeah, so that was actually authorized by City Council several years ago. And so that's an opportunity to try to get more. We had less than 100, city employees that actually used transit through payroll deduction. And so this is a way that we can provide transit for those employees who opt out of parking. So we're trying to incentivize them not to park at the Civic Center parking structure. If they do that, then they can get transit pass for their personal use and for their commute trip.
That's free, though. They're not getting it taken out of their pay?
Correct. It would not be through payroll deduction. It would be for the employee provided by the city.
And so you said that starting a couple of years ago, you had about 100 employees out of?
So the City Council authorized the director to provide transit to city employees about 3 years ago. The city never took advantage of that, and so never actually did that until recently. And so we want to make sure with this program that we're able to deploy that widely. It actually requires us going physically to each person's city ID badge and loading holo on it, so it'll take some time and effort to be able to roll out. And then we'll have to verify if they have parking or not, make sure to audit that.
Did you guys do a cost estimate of what that would, how much it would save as well as how much we would spend, I guess? Is there like a net profit for that? Or if they're not taking up parking, but now we're paying for their transit?
The parking stall is way more expensive. So market rate for a parking stall is about $200 a month in this area. And so if they were to take transit instead of us providing a parking stall, obviously there is parking, there's already investment, there's sunken costs. But it's not enough parking for all of the employees, obviously. It's only about 800, 900 spots.
Okay, sorry. And so when the city council approved this a few years ago, what was the budget? What was the estimated cost going to be to the city?
So the revenue loss, there's only, as I mentioned, there's only about 100 employees that were paying to use transit already. So there would be a net, a revenue loss immediately. Those 100 employees would no longer have to pay for their monthly bus pass. So that would be lost revenue. But in the end, we want to, it doesn't help any of us as an island if we're stuck in traffic. And so anything we can do to make an investment to try to make our travel times competitive, that's really the point of the program.
The goal is to increase that 100 number.
We want to increase the number of employees that ride transit and take other modes to work so that there are less cars on the road.
Okay. Thank you, Director Martin.
So to your question, that we were collecting about 87,000 a year in transit revenue. And this proposal this is a new idea that the ordinance allows us to generally do it for city employees in general, but we've linked it with the agreement that people would not be using parking. And this came up as part of our mitigation strategy for Civic Center parking garage, because we are going to be, during construction of that or reconstruction of that facility, we will be displacing parking from that. So we looked at a number of alternatives, including replacing parking at nearby parking facilities, looking toward other options for people. And this was one of the ones, but it emerged from that. We've linked it with the opening of rail. And we will be able to evaluate it because we'll be able to collect hard statistics on the number of employees that actually avail themselves of the program. I consider it a pilot program, and we will see how effective it is.
Okay, I look forward to getting updates about that part,
Okay.
Director. Thank you, Director Martin.
Thank you.
Chair.
Members, any other questions? Vice Chair Kiana.
Thank you. I have a question with regard to the restricted parking zone program. First of all, I am happy that part of your, near-term priorities includes an expansion. I'm assuming that you would work with the relevant communities, of course, and the relevant council members, because you would have to authorize any new program via council action, correct?
So Bill 20 had first reading, and I think it's pending putting on this committee's agenda for future consideration. And so Bill 20, one of the recommendations from DTS is to include an update to the traffic schedule. And so we totally agree that the city council member and the affected community would have to be part of that discussion. And actually, it's not something that DTS would create on its own. The only way we would consider implementing an RPZ is if the community came to us and asked for it.
And I'm sorry, did I miss? I knew we had something on Kalihi. Are you talking about the Kalihi bill, or are you talking about another bill? Oh, and that authorizes communities to be able to start up one, yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
And we would have to do it via introduction of a measure.
No. As written, it's up for your consideration, but as written, there would be, the community would ask for it, we would study it, and then it would be added by a traffic schedule.
Traffic schedule, is that like an assessment?
No, that's like when we put in a stop sign or a crosswalk.
That easy?
We go through a public hearing and notification process.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, what is the status of that? Are we past second reading yet, or is it coming back to committee?
No, we have not done a committee hearing on it, but the committee hearing will be the second hearing in May. We've done one committee hearing.
It's past second reading. Yep.
That's right. That's right. But we are going to have amendments, CD2, in the third week of May.
Okay, so it is coming back to committee again.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, and the reason I'm asking, of course, is that I'm expecting the Lanikai Transportation Management Plan to be completed And there is the high likelihood that you're going to determine that there is, should be no parking on the major thoroughfares there. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset because no one's going to be able to park there. Residents and including all of the people who access the beach, including paddlers. So we would be interested in that. And so you're telling me now then the change under this legislation would be that as opposed to us having to authorize it independently, you're going to have the administrative mechanism for DTS to be able to help launch it. Wow, okay.
Under certain parameters.
Under certain parameters, okay. Anyway, good to hear, good to hear. Thank you so much.
Members, any other questions? Okay, I do have one question about the individual TDMs for apartments or other things that generate. I think it was either 50 peak hour trips or 100 peak hour trips. Roughly, how many residential units would generate this? Obviously, it's not 100 because not everybody's leaving at 7:30 a.m. sharp.
So generally, like a single family residence generates about 10 trips a day. And then as you get into more and more density, that number changes depending on how dense the neighborhood is. So all the way down into apartment is maybe 5 or 6 trips a day. And this number comes to us as a nationally accepted, it's from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And so that's how a traffic study is written.
So let me ask, how much is the cost, for a study like this, as well as ongoing compliance? I hope it's not, burdensome. I wouldn't want the eventual tenants to have to cover this, even though they are generating trips.
So that's why we're including it in this plan. Prior to this, we did say you should do a transportation demand management plan. And they would go out and try to find a consultant to write that for them. And we got a variety of different kind of plans. So what we're doing here is we're making it incredibly simple for them. It's like a 3-page Word document that they can just fill in the blanks. They can choose from a palette of options. Somebody could basically complete it in a single day once they had their traffic study. And then annually, they would need to report back to us every year for 5 years if they were able to accomplish their goal or not. And then we would be here to provide a resource to help them accomplish it. So with this, we want to make it as absolutely simple as possible for them.
Good, glad to hear that. Thank you. Members, last call for questions on the TDM. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, hearing none, I believe there is no further business. And so there being no further business, we will adjourn the meeting. It's 3:39. Thank you.